In this walkthrough series, we're going to cover using the Plaso or log to timeline toolset, a very powerful command line based toolkit that operates in a similar functionality to the sleuth kit. For the purposes of this demonstration, I created a small training image that we're going to use to walk through in this toolset video. Now, Plaso can be used in either PowerShell or command line. For this walkthrough, we're going to be using PowerShell like we have been throughout this course. To get started though, make sure you copy over Plaso from the CFDI 320 directory and place it on your desktop. Now just remember that this training file is called ntfstraining.001. You're not going to see this file, and you're supposed to use whatever file is destined for this particular assignment. Don't stay focused on the fact that this file name is named ntfstraining.001. The techniques, tools, and tips will be the same regardless of the file that you're using. To get started, let's take a moment and open up PowerShell in Administrative Credentials by typing in PowerShell, Control on your keyboard, right-click on the mouse, Run as Administrator, and here we are. The next step is I'm going to CD to my desktop. So you can do that by CD, /users, your username, whatever it happens to be, and then desktop. Now that we're here, do an ls or dir to just give yourself a confirmation that you're in the right spot. You can also pwd just to see where exactly you are. At any time you could type in clear just to clean up the screen a little bit. Now, just prior to getting started using Plaso, I like to take this training image or whatever file I'm working on and drag it right into Plaso. The reason why I do this is just to make it a little bit easier for myself using the command line. Because if we open up the Plaso directory, we're going to see a ton of capability, a lot of tools, and a lot of different files to work with. The only thing you have to remember is what you called this particular file or training image, or what it was called for you. In this case, ntfstraining.001. So now that we're at our desktop, CD one more time into Plaso. You can even ls. You can see there's a ton of information in there. And now we know that we're in the right directory. So let's get started. Now there's several different tools that are available with Plaso. Log to timeline, psteal, psort. There's a whole bunch of different pieces. We're going to be using, for the focus of this walkthrough and this course, psteal, which is a combination of log to timeline and psort. So it takes two different steps and merges them into one tool. So it means it does more work for you and less work that you have to do for yourself. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk through this slowly. Now this approach, this particular approach, is going to be also referenced in probably a whole bunch of different resources if you start looking up help documents for log to timeline or Plaso. The approach that we're taking is what's called the kitchen sink approach, which means we're not specifying any individual filters, which, if we were doing this on a very large drive, would mean a tremendous amount of information. The kitchen sink approach specifies no filters, so that means it uses everything that it can take. If you started to specify specific filters and narrow down your approach, that's a more dialed in, sharper approach. If you're doing this technique on a very large system, highly recommend taking that approach. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use psteal. So in our PowerShell command line, /psteal.exe, that's our application. If we just hit enter here, we should get kicked back with an error, which we're doing this intentionally so we can show you that, very similar to the sleuth kit, you have to specify certain options to get it to work. So the options that we're going to take are pretty basic. Just source, how we're going to push it out, and what we're going to call the output. So we're going to use psteal here, and we're going to do -- source, and then what we're going to do is we're going to specify the file. Now this is going to be the file name that you're looking to digest. In this case, it's ntfstraining.001. Yours might be called week 7 assignment.dd or week 6 assignment, whatever you happen to be doing. This is what do you want the tool to process. So we're going to use ntfstraining.001. Close it out. Then we're going to specify the output. And in this case, we want our output to be log to timeline CSV, because I'm going to use Excel to be able to look at this output. So we're going to do L2T CSV, and then we're going to write this output to something. And in this case, I'm going to call it NTFS training underscore output.csv. You can call it whatever you wish. I just want to call it something. I typically call it something that's consistent with the file that's being processed. Once we have this, we're ready to go. So before we hit enter, let's just review. We have the command executable. We've specified our source. We've specified our output format. And then we've specified our worker or output. What specifically are we going to be outputting it to? The output file here. And this is the pattern that we have to follow. Source, output format, output file. And we can see it represented here in this string. So once we're ready to go, hit enter. You're going to see a whole bunch of information start to take place. Now, we're presented with a choice. And this is really important. If you're dealing with a very large system, or maybe you only are dialed in or specifically caring about a specific partition, this is our opportunity to select that individual partition. Think about, this is a very small image, it's a couple hundred megs. But if you're dealing with a 4 terabyte main hard drive off of a big system, and you really only cared about, say, partition 2, this is your opportunity to specifically select partition 2, and maybe you're either not legally able to look at other partitions, or you just don't need to look at those. The more options you select, the more kitchen sink approach you take, the longer this is going to take to process. In this case, we're just going to select all because we just have a small image and a small data set, and we really want to see all of it. That's our approach right now. Kitchen sink. So we're going to type in all because it says if you want all, type in all. Hit enter. It's going to give you the processing is started. Now, depending on how large this particular file is, it's going to take a while, but it's going to give you a little bit of a running kind of process here. When it's done, it's going to tell you it's done. And in this instance, now we can see it is in fact done. In the next clip, we're going to work to take a look at the results of this output. But just know, this is a very small data image. So if this was a very large multi-terabyte image, it could easily take overnight or longer if you were applying the kitchen sink profile against a very large data set.